Where have you been all of this time? It has been a very fantastic weekend, and we've just concluded probably some of the most jam-packed viewership when it comes down to some good old tactical shooty shoots. Valorant was kicking off all the way up in the north for Masters Toronto. Not a lot of people had that top two in their brackets, but also down in the south. For North America, at Austin in Texas, we did have yet another matchup going down. It was Blast Austin's major with the big dogs in attendance. Vitality in another playoff bracket. FaZe also there as well. And maybe some unnotable names that you might not have been able to see in a tournament fashion to be able to reach such a height in quite some time, and maybe some for others for their very first time. We got so much to go over on today in esports, and I am so glad to be joined again by Chris. How was your weekend, man?
It was great. As you said, we had a lot to go over. I had the dual monitors up the whole entire weekend from when I was getting home on Friday to Sunday evening, and I can't wait to jump into it.
Yeah, so I mean, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight on into it. We're going to be starting off with Blast Open, or Blast Major, excuse me. That was happening down in Austin, Texas. And as we were concluding throughout the multitude of weeks that we did have all of their stages, they had somewhere south of or north of 32 teams through multiple stages. Best of ones, best of three qualifications for the next stage, all the way until this playoff bracket that we can have up here for you guys. So this top 8 playoff bracket, all 8 of these teams, whether they started in round 1, which I don't think any of them did, had to combat all the way back towards stage 3 into this moment of time for a final bracket. Again, single elimination for Blast. There were all best of 3s, but the opening rounds were certainly turning a lot of heads initially.
They certainly were, and just taking a look at this, you see a lot of big names falling right there in just the quarterfinals of lows. FaZe dropping to Mongolz, Spirit dropping to Mongolz. Spirit actually was undefeated in their run through round 3 leading up to this playoffs. Face Mongolz once again and just can't get over that hill that they have so desperately been trying to get over, but we finally get to those grand finals there that you see Vitality versus Mongolz, but we have to figure out how we got there. So we have a lot to go over, and I can't wait to jump into those matches.
Yeah, we sure do. You already talked about some of the fallen heroes throughout the entirety of that tournament. One of them, of course, would be FaZe. A lot of eyes were on FaZe. Most importantly, for Simple's return. Again, we always want to see what Simple's going to be able to do with the AWP in his hand. Again, on loan. Is he going to be on FaZe forever? We're not too sure, but as far as this one is concerned, going up against the Mongolz, a lot of people did have FaZe at least extending it to 3, maybe if not taking the entire series, but they got held off within that first map, and then from there on out, you felt like going in towards Anubis, it was certainly going to be GG's. This is Mongol's playground.
It was, but as you said, FaZe just weren't able to get anyone really going besides Kerrigan. When your IGL is top fragging, there may be a little bit of issues, but again, this was kind of the real first tournament that Simple was able to play with them. They had, the Dallas that they played. It was kind of the opener for them. He comes into this one not really able to get over the hump. That is Mongolz. Mongolz, though, had an amazing tournament that we would end up seeing. We'll talk about them a little bit more later, but the big question, as you said, is where does Simple land after this tournament?
Yeah, and that's actually the question, right? I mean, does he play with FaZe full-time now? Is he no longer going to be on Na'Vi from loan? Does he end up going to play with Na'Vi? Because that was another team, again, that we saw in that playoff bracket that did end up losing 2 top 8. Of course, they had to go up against world's #1, but we're picking at asterisks at this point. But yeah, very tough to be able to gauge what's going to be happening with Simple's career, again, as you were already highlighting. Had a lot of bright moments in some other earlier round matches as well. Through that AWP in his hands on Dust 2, he still has those lineups, and he can still execute with the best. But as you were talking about, Kerrigan top fragging versus the Mongolz, not exactly what you want to see. I'm sure the wee-woos were definitely in the chat, but at the end of the day, you need to see more from Elige. You need to see Frozen, as well as Simple. As we remember back in their Swiss match versus the Mongolz, they actually had a really clutch 2v4 versus the 2 AWPs when they had none. So let us know in the comments down below, what do you think is going to be happening with Simple, and get engaged in that conversation as well, because it is forever heated. But that's not the only bracket busting that we did have. Chris already highlighted it before we started talking about Simple in FaZe versus Mongolz, but Spirit losing the way that they did for Mongolz. Not a lot of people inside the entirety of this office had it going that way, besides a select few. I'll go ahead and throw myself over the bus. I was one of them, because history is always doomed to repeat itself, and that's exactly what happened here.
Well, I will throw myself under the bus. I did not expect it. And this first map, I remember, I was on my way home watching this, and it was just such a banger, and I thought we were going to get this throughout the full series. Unfortunately, after this map here for Spirit, they would get the win in the overtime, but they would eventually fall. And as you said, history doomed to repeat itself. Mongolz came out on top. And unfortunately, we are at the point of Donk just not having any teammates able to really help carry him. But we turn around and look at the opposite end. Jimpat, Torzy, amazing after this map one, completely carrying their team, going +8, +7. Donk, was +15, but when he's the only one doing it, unfortunately, it will lead to the loss that we saw.
Yeah, I think this opening map, especially what was massive for Torzy, has really been coming into his own. I mean, his AWP, we saw some movement being showcased in that tie 8 that we did have release just this past week, but even with the AK, again, making really good decisions throughout the entirety of the map. Was also top frag, you saw right there. Did lose there in that 1v1. But then going over towards Nuke, Torzy was absolutely popping off. And the one thing about this matchup for Mongolz versus Spirit is that it always ends up on Nuke. And it always goes in the way of Mongolz. Xerxin over by that open area towards Secret is just an absolute anger. He's always going 1-for-1, sometimes finding 2. Their timings on that map alone are absolutely astounding. So Spirit, out at top 8. That's your former last year's major champion, by the way, are eliminated from this tournament at top 8, which means that Mongolz will then live to fight another day, and so they would end up doing so. So we do end up having a little bit of a tidbit coming through from one of their players. It's Xerxin with a quick little interview.
You can just hold it if you want.
Oh, okay.
That's easier. Yeah, so I know the first map was very exciting and went super deep into overtime. How do you guys start to change your strategies as you get into the second, third, fourth overtime? Because it's probably not set plays anymore.
Yeah, at that moment you have to kind of start throwing curveballs at the game. I think that at that moment individually you have to step up, and I think that that's what they did. They won a lot of clutches in overtime, and yeah, we couldn't really close it out. But I think that we had the game under control, and that's why the second and third map looked like the way they did.
Yeah, and especially when you guys come into like Nuke and that Tech 9 kind of is a quick momentum shift. How much does that change what your strategy is going into rounds when the aggression starts working?
Yeah, I mean, on the T side, we really struggled. They played really good. Donk was finding a lot of entries on outside on me, and in general, they were hard to play against. But when we moved to the city, we realized it's a new half. We're still not out of the game. I think in CS2, the game happens like this. It's really fast. So you just have to keep believing and stay on your toes, and I think we did that really well today.
Yeah, when you look forward into the bracket, I mean, you guys are going to probably have some tough opponents no matter what to try to win the major. Are there any specific matchups you're really looking forward to, or just whoever's next?
Yeah, I mean, whoever's next, it doesn't really matter for us. Of course, Vitality would be nice to try to get revenge for the season. They have done a lot of issues for us, and also Na'Vi, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him. Also, they are a great team. They've played pretty good in the group stage, so I'm just looking forward to see who we play. I think any team we will face at the major playoffs will be amazing, so yeah, we will see.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Really good insight there from Xerxin. Out of GGN's own Dylan and Locke, they were sitting there on the scene throughout the entirety of the weekend for Blast Major. So awesome to be able to hear those thoughts again. Whatever's next, whatever's ahead of him, you can see him tipping his hat to Donk, giving him a lot of pushback on Nuke, but a big moment coming away from Xerxin, again, for Mongolz as a whole, who have been falling short in other tournaments, to be able to get past Spirit yet again was a monumental feat. But that was, of course, was not the only matchup that we got to be keeping in mind of when it comes down to these opening matchups. We did have a good old Vamos showdown, the Brazilian Civil War between Pain versus Furia was coming up next. And throughout this winners round 1, honestly, this was a toss-up. Nobody knew which way this was going to go.
I don't think so either, but we did see Furia come out on top. As we can see here, they did lead in the first map, but after that, it was only Pain for them, as Pain ended up taking the lead after. But we did have some pretty cool, we did see NZD and about MVP, 56 kills in total, but I do think it was big that we ended up having some mentor-mentee against it. So Fallen ended up having Big Zera and Snow early in their careers, ended up coaching them, and now they're playing against him while they're on Pain and he's on Furia. They ended up taking it, so maybe it's a little passing of the mental here. Of course, Furia, he's going to want to make sure that they push forward, but it is cool to see that they were able to come forward and they were able to take this to the next step after taking this win versus Furia.
Yeah, really good overtime battle there on Inferno and between both Pain and Furia, but as the single elimination tournament does kind of beckon, only one of them can continue on, so of course, we will have to give massive commiserations to Furia, who had a very good tournament. Again, a lot of people did not even have them making it out of stage 3 when they were competing, but to be able to make it towards that main stage for a finals appearance is definitely something to decide to behold. Pain also along the way were able to beat Virtus Pro, so that we know that they were certainly coming with an extra bit of vamos, I suppose. But with all that being said, Pain would continue on throughout the entirety of their bracket. Naturally, they would go on into the semifinals, which they were on one side of the bracket compared to the other. And we're going to be talking about Pain in their next matchup as well, because off of the win versus FaZe, the Mongolz are here again on the screen, but this time going up against the Brazilian powerhouse.
Yes, and this is where they would meet their match. Mongolz absolutely looking great. And 9-10, what can I say, going plus 10 on this. He has been popping off this whole entire tournament so far. Mongolz would end up going to Mirage 13-5, then they would go to Anubis 13-5. Pain was just not really able to find any leeway to get into this match, and Mongolz just look on top of it.
Yeah, really did. Again, Mongolz in a tournament form throughout the entirety of the weekend. If you missed the crowd reactions, do yourself a solid favor and go back and rewatch every single series from this past weekend that the Mongolz were on the screen. 9-10, every single AWP kill was met with massive roars from the crowd the entire time. This is the first time that the full Mongolian team was playing with a crowd that was fully behind them. We always love the Mongolz, and we are always very excited to be able to see what they're able to do in a tournament, but somewhere south of maybe 50,000 people inside of one venue just cheering for that entire team. That's a massive buff to come all the way through. But of course, Pain will be bowed out there for top 4 at the end of the tournament, or top 6, excuse me. So very tough scenes, but honestly speaking, Pain beating Virtus Pro the way that they did and continuing on throughout all of their Swiss matches. And then, of course, beating Furia. I think a lot of analysts, even there at the event, truly did have Pain not even getting past Furia. So with that being said, Mongolz, they advanced to the grand finals. Nobody was ended up really thinking about that, beating Pain the way that they did. But on the other side of the bracket, that's where things got a little bit more stacked and a little bit more scary. So we're going to start off there on winners round 1 for the other side of the bracket, the more stacked side, as we may call it. We're going to start off with the conversation with Vitality versus Na'Vi.
Yes, and well, you can't start off without talking about Vitality here, but Na'Vi would come out. They would try to come out swinging here. It would be pretty close. Vitality only winning 13-9, 13-11 on both the maps, Mirage and Nuke. ZywOo, though, doing ZywOo things. Plus 14 on this quad kill on Mirage, started their map takeover and just allowed them, because we know they were down here, but when you allow ZywOo to pop off, get a 4K, then it kind of just shifts that momentum. He's highly regarded as the best player in the world. He probably is the best player in the world right now. Gets the knife in the back onto Wonderful, and from there they just catapult.
Yeah, again, ZywOo was truly in his bag throughout the entirety of this series. I mean, throughout both of the maps that were played, or all 3 maps that were played, he was still somewhere near plus 18 throughout both of them as well. Mezzi was having crucial holds throughout the entirety of Mirage, and Flamesy's ace was a massive momentum swing for Vitality. It's just the usual suspects. I mean, it almost feels like that we could sit there and pluck any one of those 5 players for Vitality, and they're all going to have their brighter moments in time. They're going to be semifinals bound now, going towards the winner of the Mongolz matchup, which we were just highlighting earlier. Mongolz were able to beat Spirit. Spirit, your former champions, eliminated, which means that the next series for semifinals on the stack side of the bracket, are you understanding why I'm saying it's so stacked? Because 1, 2, and 3 globally are on one side of the bracket. We got a grand finals appearance in a semifinal matchup. It is Mongolz Esports going up against Vitality again. You feel like that every single time that these teams face each other, it always goes 5, but here at the Blast Major, we only got best of 3s.
We did, and it feels like almost a tale as old as time at this point, but it's only from this year that we've seen these 2 teams play against each other so much. But Rob's doing amazing. He came from behind, got him at a plus 13, but we would end up going all 3 maps finally. So Vitality would win Mirage, Mirage would win Inferno, and then Vitality would come back on train to get the final win to push them to that grand finals. And this is finally kind of where we saw, Vitality being pushed to the limits. This tournament, they did lose 1 in the opening of round 3, and then now they're being pushed to the limit as well in this semifinal match. So we're starting to see a little bit of the weakness, but still just these strengths from Vitality seem too much for Mongolz to overcome.
Yeah, it's funny how on the opposite, right? You go in towards Train, and towards he was 1-11 on one side, but then the map previous to that, he's 11-1. It's the hot or cold misses, but Vitality adding Train in towards their map picks is pretty scary for a lot of other teams that are trying to get one against them, because at that point, they just have to veto both Anubis as well as Ancient. their entire best of 5 map pool at that point is just all for the lick and the picking. So with that being said, you saw there at the end the score lines would be very suggestive. It did go 3 maps because we're always guaranteed to be a banger in between both Mouse Esports and Vitality, but it would be Vitality again getting the better of Mouse Esports, who are constantly getting so close, but yet so far away. I mean, 13-8 was incredibly close. Turned around at the end of that half on Mirage. Inferno 13-4, and then Train 13-6. So very tough matchup when it comes down to it for all of Mouse Esports. But we did have a certain moment in time. Again, we did have boots on the ground at the venue to get a quick little word from a handful of those players.
So I know today that Inferno map was legendary. You basically did what teams cannot do against Vitality. Like, how does that feel in that moment?
Felt good after the Inferno, obviously, that we finally beat them on Inferno because we knew it will be the punish pick, and we also have been struggling a little bit on Inferno, so it felt really good to play finally a really good Inferno, especially in a major semi-finals, you know. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I know moments like these are always tough, but at the beginning of the year, would you have thought that, hey, we're going to be consistently and effectively what everybody's considering the grand finals, every time it's going to be you and Vitality going blow for blow, and you guys keep getting closer and closer, but I know the second places can't feel good, but it's got to be good to be on an echelon ahead of the rest of the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to... It's not the best to be the second, you know, obviously, but I'm still really proud of the season we had. After Katowice, we changed Camille to her, and we had a great season. Like, we went to win Klajna-Poika to grand finals, to semis, and losing to Vitality all the time, and it is what it is. I'm still really proud of what we achieved this season, and hopefully the next one will be better.
And the exciting thing, too, is you've kind of busted open their map pool a little bit. It feels like you guys can beat them on any map now. When you look to the next season, like, what are some of the takeaways you guys are going to have looking forward?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure about the takeaways yet. I think we need to rewatch the game and think about it a little bit and process it. It's hard to say in the moment, but I'm sure there will be some good and important takeaways for the next season.
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw, but yesterday Kerrigan said something to the effect of, we don't need to be in every final like Vitality. We just like to be in some. But whenever you first joined this organization, is that what you expected to get out of it, like to be in everything every time?
No, I mean, at first you never really know what you're going to get. But when you're playing with the top players, this is, of course, is going to happen. And you would never expect to be in this many finals and this many wins as we have, but it's so fun and so great to play in a team like this, and I would never expect it before. But those are the expectations of a top-tier organisation, and that's what we need to expect of ourselves as individuals as well, to make sure that we're constantly evolving and improving as players to make sure we can get to as many finals as we can, because yeah, it's also pretty fun being at every final as well.
Absolutely. And it's also one of those things where, you know, obviously Zaiwu gets a lot of the praise internationally, but all of you guys are incredible killers. And at times it has to really allow you to kind of play off of one another, because nobody can have a bad game, especially in moments like this, but it feels like you have a roster of people that can't have a bad game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about this team. It's... yeah, like you say, we have every individual in this team can pop off at any moment. And I think that's what makes us so great. I think, like say, Zaiwu is probably going to have a good game 99% of the time, but we also have so many guys in this team, whether it's even Apex stepping up in the fragging department, but he's also such a great captain that keeps us all focused on the job at hand and focused on the objective, and that helps us as individuals focus on our individual as well. So I think when we have all of this behind us and this structure and everything as a team, it makes it a lot easier as individuals to stay confident and stay calm and to perform at our best as well.
And then last question, you guys were so dominant on Inferno for so long, and then it feels like you lost two of them in quite quick succession. Is it one of those where it's like, at this point, it's like you'll play any map, any time, any person, you don't really care? It's like, I know you guys have one permaban you're not letting through, but other than that, is everything on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, even though we've got 2 losses on Inferno in the last 2 games, and it's not even really been that close, I think we're still really confident on this map. It was probably our best map for quite a while during the season, so I think we're happy to play any of these maps. I think we have the strongest map pool at the moment, and yeah, we haven't played some of the other maps like Anubis haven't played for a while, but even in this map as well, we're really confident. So yeah, whatever comes up, we're happy to play.
Strongest map pool, strongest players. What else could you ask for? Right? Good luck.
Yes, thank you.
Massive moments coming out from those interviews again. I mean, Mezzi solidifying the conversation once again. Like, the map pool is what it is. You got your hard veto. It's just about fleshing out where you were once comfortable already from the beginning of the season. They're still on top at the end of the day.
They are. And as I said, they still feel confident on Inferno. They may have lost to it actually twice that they're saying, but they still think they have the best map pool, and they're certainly showing it right now as they are headed towards, once again, another grand finals. And this, so we talked about it. Mongolz is already there. Vitality has made their way there once again. And, well, we were in for a treat into it. So let's go ahead and jump into the grand finals. That would be Mongolz versus Team Vitality. And what a map one that we got. I can't believe we were watching this and Mongolz absolutely took it to them in the first one. They limited to only Apex being positive for Vitality on this map. And I think they just put an absolutely great showing what they were capable of and that they absolutely deserve to be in these grand finals.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was Mongol's pick, and this is a chow within its own right, because Vitality holding the records that they do, both in grand finals appearance and in maps win and in series win. Mirage is constantly always in there, right? But, I mean, you have yourself an absolute stellar for a first half. 9-10 was, again, having a fantastic event throughout the entirety of it, but I would say this much. Vitality, they started off great. It was a 4-0 start. And then throughout the entirety of the rest of the half, Mongolz fought back valiantly to be able to put up a 7-5 half before they end up swapping back over towards the CT side. And this was the last moment right here, 1v1 versus Techno. He was just holding the corner, had no HP, but still somehow won it. And then it jumped straight towards this moment of time where they didn't lose a single round on CT. They retook every single bomb site, even in a post plant. They got the defuse in the first round, but then the subsequent next 5, they eliminated all of Vitality, which not a lot of teams say they can do. But when 9-10 is hitting shots like that, and he's catching good timings to couple that along with Techno being 11-7 when the round count is 12-5. Yeah, I'm going to take this Mongolz every single time and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, once they got going, they were just able to roll with the momentum. As you said, everyone was firing on all cylinders. Sinzu as well had a great game with +11 on the KD. And this is what we expected out of this Mongolz team when they're getting here and what we wanted to see. Cheers from them going on, but this is a best of 3, so we still have at least one more map to go, and it would lead us to Dust 2. And we know how good Vitality are on the Dust 2 map. And they started out just with a staggering 6 wins in a row to just put a statement on, well, game number 1 is done and over. Let's get into game number 2.
Yeah, I mean, look, starting off however many rounds for Vitality may not even matter. I mean, they started off 5-0 as far as the Mirage is concerned, and then they still lost that one 13-5. But it would be very different this time around, as you were talking about. Dust 2 is essentially the back of their less dominant hand, but still very familiar. Dust 2 all throughout all of its changes. Still, Vitality were the ones to actually upset Falcons here at one point in time to stop their Herculean run. So trying to keep things ever so cheeky in towards the corner. Mezzi lurking through the big doors, just forcing Mongolz play. Again, Mongolz, they love their full-fledged attack and hoping that they can get some trades, but Vitality in their trading capabilities on the CT side were just that much better, Chris. They only gave up 3 rounds on this side, and it only took about 7 rounds until we finally saw Mongolz put 1 up on the board.
Yes, and right now we were talking about on the previous map only Apex going positive this time. To completely flip the script, and of course when you're going 6 rounds in a row, it's going to look like this, but Mezzi's Iwu stepping up into this map, giving them the direction that they needed and the pressure that they needed to start taking it to the Mongolz on this side swap. As we see here though, again, they would open up with the first 3 rounds, eventually putting them 2 point, and then when you're sitting at 12-3 at that point, you know, it's just a little too much ground to make up when you're playing against like Vitality, the top caliber team that they are. It's a little big of a hump to come over, as we see here. Sinzu trying to hold off the planting coming out. They're going to try to play for it, but it's just a little too tough for them at the moment. They weren't really able to get the kills that they needed. Here it is again, match point. The round was won for them finally off the time, but this would be the round where they would stamp the 1-1 and bring the series to that game number 3 that they were looking for to try to win their next major. Zywoo, of course, popping off with the op here.
Yeah, Zyru went 18-8, but I mean, the biggest shout out has to be Mezzi again with the rifle in hand, went 20-7, had 5 of those assists with a 99.7 ADR. To say that Mezzi was playing phenomenally on Dust 2 would be putting it lightly, as the only Brit for, or the the only Brit for the team, excuse me, absolutely was going AWOL and crazy. Had the best rating throughout the entirety of that map as well. And it set them up wonderfully. I mean, you remember the end of the interview, was talking about Inferno. They're going to continue to chow people on Inferno because they know how to veto against the Mongolz. You just have to get rid of either Anubis or Ancient. You're going to be able to get your best 3 maps, knowing that they're probably going to end up picking Mirage. And that was absolutely the case. Inferno for a decider. You couldn't have asked for a better conclusion for this series. Albeit Mongolz winning the pistol, Vitality won this round right here. It was the anti-eco, full-on force buy. You got MPs in the hand of both Flamesy and Rops as they're still trying to fight through Banana to maybe try to get themselves in towards the B bomb site. And this is what Vitality continue to do so well. Their flash, stun, executes, swarm the bomb site. They know exactly where everybody is, but it sets up Zywu for a 1v2. Combined HP of 59 between Mizzino and Blitz. One body shot might do it. There's the first. The swing comes through and for some odd reason could not find the trade, albeit a scary situation. Vitality took that anti-eco and then ripped 3 more in a row.
Yes, they would. And as you said, actually, they just ripped the 4 in a row. So they end up winning, get to 5-1 after that. And it's, again, the momentum that they build is just so hard to stop them afterwards. Apex once again would come out massive in this, ending 17-11 on this map. And it's just, when you have such a leader like that that's able to frag out such as he does, it just seems like it was too much for Mongolz to overcome. And Zeno ended up going 13-14. And then, you know, we're talking about Techno and 9-10. 9-10 ended up negative level 11 on this map, and that's someone that you need to pop off. He's such a hot or cold player, and they needed him to be on top of it, such as he was in map 1. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Vitality, though, firing on all cylinders. Zywu would end up going 10-10, but as Mezzi was talking about, they have high caliber players, world-class players across all of them. So even though if Zywu does not step up, they have Rops, they have Flames, Apex, Mezzi were all able to fill in the gaps, and this is what led them to this Grand Finals win. We're seeing it here, 9-10, once again in the 1v2, has the op out, trying to do his best. It's not going to be enough, is going to get taken down, and there they are, Vitality, your Grand Finalists and winners once again.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be a tough situation. Inferno starting off on the CT side is typically where you want to be. You have the luxury of adaptations right in front of you, and it was absolutely all there for Apex, as you were talking about, making really good comms, making those adjustments. And then, again, for Messi, Flamesy, your rifleman, and then Zywu just having to do what he does best, and that's just put that crosshair in somebody's center chest and then watch him get blown to smithereens. So here is the conclusion for Blast Austin Major. Just concluded this past weekend. It went the distance for Grand Finals. Vitality only lost 2 maps in the championship bracket. Look, their series record might be over, but the Grand Finals appearances very much so are still alive. And from out all of this as well, many of us are asking, is anybody going to be able to fully beat Vitality? Because they keep getting close. Mongolz took a map off of them here. We've also seen Mouse play them close. We've seen Falcons play them close as well. Who's going to be the one to step up and finally dethrone this darn Vitality roster who is just winning everything? They have the most winningest season that we've seen so far, I think, as far as earnings are concerned. They are number 3 overall as far as most teams throughout a generational run across the entirety of a year. Now just trumping over the 2023 FaZe with Kerrigan, Elige, and that entire team as well. So big stuff coming through for the team of Vitality to hoist yet another trophy, which was gosh darn sexy throughout the entirety of that tournament as well, who are, again, in the Champions Circle. Big congratulations to them. And if you want to shoot like Zywu, well, what are you waiting for? Download Aim Labs on Steam or any other platform. It is the #1 aim trainer on the internet. Here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Games are about competition, a way to test our skill and prove we're better. Challenge is in our nature. We need to know what we're capable of. How far can we go? It's a question that drives millions of gamers to push themselves and prove that it's only a matter of sheer will. Ever since first-person shooters came into the esports scene, players have never stopped defying the odds through the most important mechanic of them all: aim. Aim is everything. It's a set of skills that needs to be trained, and this is where science and gaming meet in Aim Labs, the aim trainer that redefines what gaming means, because science doesn't leave anything to chance. Winning is never a matter of luck. Every brief moment of greatness takes constant and unrelenting preparation, and that's exactly what Aim Labs is about. We enable players to thrive and upset the balance. Together, we elevate play.
And that'll go ahead and do it for Counter-Strike. We won't see them back in action until IEM Cologne at the end of July. But what is still going on and what we still need to discuss is another major tournament happening well far north from what just transpired for Counter-Strike down in Texas. I'm talking about VCT Masters Toronto, of course. It was a doozy of a tournament. I mean, from Swiss stages all the way in towards that playoff bracket, nobody was safe from any sort of upset.
They really weren't. And, well, let's go ahead and take a look at that said bracket that caused all the chaos. After the play-ins, after the Swiss stages, we finally got in, and let's take a look at the winner's corner that we're taking here. You know, we had G2 versus Paper X. Actually, had told us many a times throughout the series, remember that the #1 seeds got to choose who they want to face off against. So we're seeing here as G2, XLG, RRQ, and Gen G all picked who they wanted and all ended up losing to who they picked. We would end up going to the winners round 2 here. Paper X versus Sentinels, Wolves versus Gen G, G2 versus XLG, RRQ versus Fnatic, and wow. It was an amazing series out of all of them, but we have a lot of games to jump into for those winner rounds and the eliminations. Take a look at those. Of course, we had Paper X would end up winning versus Sentinels, moving on to the winners round 3 versus them. Let's take a look at Sentinels match as well. And, well, it was quite a match versus Paper X.
Yeah, no, it really was. Again, I think a lot of individuals did not have Paper X playing this incredibly well. I mean, they're a very scrappy team. Something was really playing well all weekend long, but it's Sentinels, right? I mean, tournament favorite, crowd favorite, everywhere that they go. They don't need 10s on this roster for everybody to just shout and scream for them, but shout and screaming on the opposite side, you get something cooking and you start barking if you're Sentinels. You best match that bite, and going over towards Split for the conclusion of that was just not it. 13-4 was a crazy scoreline. You felt like going in towards Sunset for Sen's pick, this might be the place where maybe PRX would be forced to be a little bit more honest off of their very strange composition. I will say this much, as far as the composition is concerned, PRX forcing Devi over towards the Sage on this map rather than the Vice was definitely a weird one, but they made it work, and at the end, beating Sentinels 2-0 and forcing them down to the lower bracket from that winner's bracket match, which is absolutely insane.
It was. And as you said, not what many people thought of. You know, some people, you were giving them shout-out praises. We did have, you know, Davis as well shouting their praises. I am a Sentinel, so I want to see Sentinels win. But Paper X are just on another level this tournament. They're playing so well, and we saw it there, you know, the clutch coming out of many. Something as well, doing such a great job at the end. Sentinels just unable to cope with it, did fall to the lower bracket. We did have one more, though. We would end up having Wolves in the upper round finals as well. And, well, Sufat, what can you say? The aura from this man just popping off here as well. And they had an amazing run. They would end up going against Gen G in the round to try to make it to that upper winners finals as well. And this Wolves team just looks amazing.
Yeah, no, they really did. I mean, Siafat, again, walked inside of that arena, aura farming, not by choice, just by nature. Just absolutely insane. It felt like that this team could do no wrong. The crowd was fully behind them throughout the entirety of this. Throughout Swiss, they beat Billy Gaming. That is a regional matchup that has constantly belittled Wolves throughout the entirety of their career as a team, especially in the most recent stage. But going up against Gen G, the world's #1 APAC team after they were besting RRQ, you felt like that this was going to be the next step in the road for Wolves Esports to try to overcome, but overcome they did. I mean, in the way that they did for a 2-0 was just beautiful, because not only are they finally silencing a lot of the doubters, but they're also showcasing that this meta actually works really well for them, specifically for Sea of Fat on that double initiator composition. It really does enable the rest of that team to be able to do what they were doing and to keep texture in check. We know how much Texture likes to play Neon and go rogue on these duelists. A lot of other teams throughout this very tournament have struggled to do so, but Wolves were able to do it and keep them in check.
They were, and that would set up that upper bracket final between Paper X and Wolves. But remember, we still have a lower bracket to go through. It is double elimination. Gen G would fall down, and they would have to end up facing, or Gen G would go against G2 Esports. And this is one where I don't think a lot of people thought to see either one of these teams. Both of the teams coming out as the first seeds in their region would end up having to face each other, and they gave us a pretty good match, though.
Yeah, no, they really did. I mean, G2 versus Gen G. You're talking about the #1 from NA, #1 from APAC, at least in power rankings are concerned, going up against each other. And you got Texture trying to play the Rays going up against Juggernaut, who's actually there on the Yoru. The composition for G2 was a shade of compositions past with Trent going back over towards the Teo. Again, he was nerfed, but still very much so an effective use there when it came down to that map. Then we swapped over towards the map #2. This is where Gen G definitely felt a lot more comfortable. G2, surprisingly, on this map mode combination internationally back in Masters Bangkok, never beat any of the top APAC teams, T1, never beat any of the top Chinese teams, Edward Gaming, on Haven. So it had to go Icebox, where G2 would actually end up eliminating Gen G. But what we did not end up seeing was the one round that Gen G just spilled all of the spaghetti. And I mean like a witch's brew pot of spaghetti all over the floor of Icebox. They lost a single round. They forced spot for the next 3, and it was, 9 rounds in a row that G2 were able to rip. It came down to a clutch 1v1, at least for the overtime right there for Trent, of course, because of course it was, with the shock dart to be able to win that final gunfight. But I mean, G2, I mean, they're as scrappy as ever. I truly felt like that maybe they weren't at their peak in this meta, but beating Gen G the way they did, nobody definitely saw that.
They did not, and well, as the chaos ensued, though, as we would have Sentinels fall to that lower bracket, we would eventually have them facing off against Fnatic. And, well, that went the way as well. That went all 3 maps for that match. And unfortunately, Sentinels will fall. Fnatic, EU's last hope, continuing their run through the finals bracket in the losers to try to make their way to the grand finals.
Yeah, I mean, so we got Fnatic versus G2 Esports. And Fnatic, as you were talking about, EMEA's last hope as far as the region is concerned. The other 2 teams, Heretics, we don't really got to talk about that. Team Liquid was their second best bet, and they almost ended up making it towards the playoffs as well. But Fnatic, again, the #1 seed from EMEA, they chose to face Gen G as their opening matchup, whether it was the last one that was available or not. They did have that choice, and they lost. As we were talking about, all #1 seeds, they lost the opening winners round 1 matchup. So it's a lower round 1 match or bust for EMEA, and especially for a lot of these individuals, for these teams, well, they're hoping to at least make it back towards the grand finals. So Fnatic, they were able to not only beat G2, but they beat them 2-0 of all things. I mean, the Lotus, it was G2's pick. They lost 13-10, 13-10 then on the split. Throughout all of this, I cannot lie, G2 maybe not lost, but their fragging just was not there. Alpha A, how many times were we singing the praise of that guy? Played the Killjoy for a map too, but finished the entire series with a 46-27 stat line. Chronicle on Viper is always something to behold. So Fnatic, they beat G2, and then they continue on with their bracket of destiny. Paper X continuing on with theirs as well, all the way to grand finals. Keep in mind you that they almost ended up losing to Team Liquid. It was like 11 rounds in a row towards the overtime. They might not have actually ended up being here, but then they faced Wolves in that winners finals match, and they beat them 2-0.
They did, and they, as we said, this is the run for it. This is the run for the APAC, and they're running with their momentum, but it wouldn't be easy on the Lotus pick, so they would end up going into overtime. It was Paper X's pick. They would end up winning 14-12, but Wolves, as we said, are coming through their massive, almost miracle run as well, but there it is, the ace. I remember watching this and just almost completely jumping out of my seat as he did as well there. They're winning, but it's still so cool to see how they're progressing through these. They end up taking, as I said, Lotus 14-12, and then they move on to Ascent.
Yeah, so Wolves, again, you felt like after losing that map #1 in overtime, it only took 2 rounds to be able to do it. Going in towards Ascent, we would almost be in the same exact boat. Not the case, not at all. Not with something on Jet. Not when he's going 19-13. You also have to keep in mind that Jing is playing on a flex role here for the Omen, and when he's throwing out utility and he's baiting for Forsaken and something to be able to make plays. And a couple of the rounds that we got to see out of Patman as well. This was PRX in their peak form. Again, they are a very scrappy team, and they will be grand finals bound with a 2-0 win over Wolves. That means that we then knock down Wolves towards that lower finals where they will have to then face Fnatic. Fnatic, who, by the way, have constantly been going up against the best and have been beating the best. We talked about them going up against RRQ. It took them 3 maps. That's technically APAC's #1 seed after beating Gen G in their stage. Then they faced up against Sentinels, who was #2 from the Americas, who were crowd favorites in this tournament. And then they had to go up against G2 of all different things. And watch throughout all of these highlights, you feel like that Fnatic are constantly just getting better and better. Kayak, this is his first international tournament. It's his rookie debut on the international stage. He's surrounded by so many players that are so used to being here. Major champions within their own right. Alpha is one of them. Crashies, as well as Boaster and Chronicle. We're talking about the best of the best to play in the EMEA region. So Kayak could not have asked for a better supporting staff to be able to go up against Sentinels, as you see right here with a 2-1 win.
Yes, and Boaster popping off with that. As we said, they continue the run. Of course, they did have to face off against G2 after, which would be the #1 team from the Americas. And as we said, we have all these #1 seeds here in the lower bracket. It's not an easy run for anyone through this. They have to play to their best. They mostly, fortunately, dodged Gen G, who sent them to that lower, so they would end up going facing against G2. Of course, as you said, they played on the Lotus and the Split here, so we'll take a little deeper dive into those. And these games weren't easy as well. 13-10, 13-10 on both of them really made Fnatic work.
Yeah, no, they really did. Again, going in towards this matchup, for G2 side, again, you got your Lotus pick, and you got a split pick out of Fnatic, so this could very much so be a winning best-of-3 map set for G2. The problem is that you cannot always rely on everything that you were finding value with in the previous stage. It feels like that without that early damage, getting that early intel, G2 entering in towards a lot of these retakes or going in blindly comparatively to the opposite side when it came down to Fnatic's composition. They had so many different ways to be able to brute force their way in. Alpha on the Raze with the Pain Shells was constantly finding a lot of good area damage. Crashies on the Fade. His Nightmares were really good for all of the retakes. And then Boaster was actually on the Astra, and it's a pick that we don't see all too often on Split, but you can see with the concussion of the stars, not to mention the Cosmic Divides, was being utilized ever so wonderfully for Fnatic to eliminate Masters Bangkok's second-place team, G2, America's #1. After beating America's #2, Fnatic are well and truly on their way for a fantastic run. But the problem is, now they got to go up and against lower finals, as we were highlighting. That's against Wolves.
Yes, and a Wolves team that has a lot of momentum for them. Would they have been slowed down after that fight against PaperX and that loss? And ultimately, it would be yes. They would end up losing 3-1 against Fnatic in those lower finals, and the run would come to an end. But again, Fnatic just looking so good through that lower run. I think that it shows the amount of work and preparation that they put in. But huge shout out to Bolster for just pretty much boosting his team through that lower run and into this one against Wolves.
The thing you have to remember going in towards lower finals and grand finals for a Masters tournament is that they then transition from just best of 3s to a full bore best of 5. Like, you're on that main stage for a very long time with the only breaks that you have in between maps, but you best come with your brain rested and your best foot forward, because Icebox was the map #2, and Fnatic on this map mode combination have constantly been looking better and better. And although Wolves, they were the main character of the entire stage in the entire tournament, they were not the Cinderella of this story. This is the Fnatic showcasing right here. The map that they did end up losing end up being, what was it, the Lotus, I believe, which was a Fnatic pick. It was 13-10, and it was incredibly close to actually just being a straight-up 3-0. But shout out Wolves for fighting as valiantly as they did. Commiserations to them in their tournament. I hope that that's not the last that we see them on the international stage, let alone what's in the future for Valorant as a whole. But Fnatic get it done in 4. And from lower bracket round 1, comparatively to PaperX from the Swiss stage, we got back-to-back Cinderella runs. One from the winner's bracket from the Swiss, one from #1 seed from the lower bracket of Fnatic. It's EMEA versus APAC in the grand finals.
It is, and well, I think this was one of my favorite grand finals to watch. It showed two teams, as you said, one Cinderella through the winners, one through the losers, and they absolutely just threw fists at each other the whole entire time. I don't think we had a blowout through any one of these. Two of them going into overtime. Both of the maps that were won were pretty close, 13-10, 13-11 on Sunset. Then we have Icebox, and then as well as the Lotus going into overtime. Both of these teams came to win, but ultimately only one could. So let's take a look at those grand finals to see who our winner would be.
Yeah, starting off in the grand finals would end up being the Sunset. This is Paper X's map 1 pick. They would have that luxury, of course, being from the winner's bracket side, and going up against EMEA's best, who truly know we were going to be able to get. The composition differences, I mean, Kayak there on the Neon, I would say maybe not as comfortable as his Jet, but definitely a better pick for this team. I was expecting Alpha-A to actually pick the Rays to actually match Jing here, but we end up getting the Cypher. We know that Alpha-A also likes to flex over towards the Sentinel. That opens up Chronicle to play the Viper. Double smoke there from Boaster on the Omen, which was matched on the opposite side. The biggest difference was Devi on the Sage. And although the only biggest difference is the Resurrection, it paid a lot of dividends as far as this series is concerned. Certain reses coming through, forcing numbers back in the favor of PRX. Here's a big moment out of Kayak as he found 2 through mid for them to be able to win that round. But it got so close to overtime there at the final moment. You just needed one more to be able to push it. If you are Paper X, here comes that wall, and what I was talking about, paying dividends. Yeah, you get these nice little peaks all the way through the window, and you can set up nice little picks like that. The high-low from the window, all off of the Sage. That's why you're seeing Sage be picked in this meta, both on Icebox and on Sunset, when you can make little Q plays like that.
Yeah, and speaking about we look at Paper X, they are sharing some of the pools. So Sova on the from Forsaken and Something's just showing that they have the versatility for their team comps. And it ultimately led to this win for them, that they can play these different comps and allowed them to push for that win. Again, they would have a tough time, though, on that last map on the Lotus. So, but we would jump into Icebox next, and this one went the distance and some more. So everyone getting exactly what they paid for out of this grand finals. And it started off with the Paper X getting those 4 wins in a row, but then answered by Fnatic with 3. And it just kind of was from there, just trying to see who could win that tug of war between them.
So 4-0 start for Paper X here. And then it was a 3 on the bounce for Fnatic. Icebox in between these two teams really did feel like that it was anybody's game. And Chronicle did try to match there on the Sage, trying to at least maybe get another Sage pick out of the Vi, but when it comes to Paper X, they know exactly what they're going to be playing going in towards this, and by any means necessary, just try to set up something for some late lurks, some late flanks as well, not to mention Jing on the Omen. I think that was probably one of the bigger picks to be watching out for, is the constant smoking that was available from the double smoke on the side of Paper X compared to the Fnatic. This is going to be the last round and a half, and it would be 6-6 going in towards the opposite side, which would be PRX's offense, but it's Icebox, baby. I mean, you get a good defensive setup. You can end up getting off the A or divide, depending on which killjoy you're talking about, in a situation to deny access in the middle of the map or the B or the A bomb site. You know exactly where the spike is going to be going towards next. And then Fnatic were able to do that quite wonderfully. 4 in a row on the defense, lost the next one, and then won the preceding 2. But then this is where things got a little bit more wonky at that 12-7.
Yes, and this is where he said we would get the swap 5 in a row for the side of Paper X. This would allow them to take it to the overtime to ultimately try to fight it out. But again, this is Fnatic's pick. They're actually looking good on it besides these last 5 rounds in a row where they end up losing. Here it is. Paper X are finally going to get this last round that they need to get it forced into the overtime. And Fnatic would have to battle back. After that, they would end up winning the first round into OT. They would start trading. After that, it would be the next 2 going over for the side of Paper X, 2 then for the side of Fnatic. At the end of the day, it would be Fnatic who would finally end up taking this map 17-15. And it was their pick, but Paper X are taking them the distance.
That was quad overtime. That probably should never have existed when you were at a 12-7 scoreline and you were in the driver's seat. We just got to get these maps to be closed out here. Devi would be leading the way, of course, for Paper X. Went 29 and 21 throughout all that map. Again, Killjoy loves a good Icebox. On the opposite side, it is the Young Buck Kayak. Again, This is his rookie debut, but on the Jet was able to help Fnatic get on the board. So at least we're guaranteed to go map 4, which would be that Lotus. But we got to get the map 3 first, which wouldn't end up being Pearl. And this map, as far as the composition, whether you love it or hate it, has been a staple for deciders across the entirety of Valorant's history since its addition in towards the map pool. And it's mostly thanks to the Vice play that you can get away with. The Vi, off of that Killjoy play, his gunny was already hot, but then you put him on a character he's quite comfortable with. Oh, man, he was in his bag.
Yes, and so again, it would actually start with Fnatic, though, taking this. They would get the first 2, ended up losing the next 3, and then would end up getting 4 in a row afterwards. So they would end up leading the half 7-5 on, of course, PaperX's pick here on the Pearl. After that, though, on the switch into defense, it would end up being all PaperX. They would end up losing the first 2, but then after that, they would just gain a massive momentum swing to take this map. And as you see here, we're talking about only in the first half, Alpha Air getting some good snipes, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, double duelist compositions. You got the Yoru on both sides, Raze at least on one, but the other duelist was Alpha A on the Neon. Patman on the Fade comparatively to Crashies on the Sova. Not that there's a bad pick, but the retakes become so much more easier with the Nightmare you're seeing right here. But Fnatic's Gunny forcing out there for the 1v1. Last pick required, still got the mark on him. You just got to stick it because the spike's about to detonate. And Forsaken on the Astra pick of all agents ends up getting that last elimination. I will say this much as far as a big old compositional difference is concerned. It feels like that this team for PaperX, at least through these 3 maps so far, have a good understanding of what they're trying to play as far as a role is concerned. I've always had this thought process when it comes to Fnatic, is that they really struggle with an identity. You got Alpha A playing all these different Sentinels, all these different duelists. It's forcing Crashies to fix in between all these different Sentinels where he could possibly play a lot of these different initiators. And then and then Boaster as well. I mean, he's all over the place, and he just needs to be in a position to be able to play the IGL role. So I'm not too sure. I mean, Fnatic, they got to try to figure something out quickly because it is championship point now with that Pearl Map 3 win out from PaperX. So we would get that map 4 guarantee that we were talking about. It would go over towards Lotus, which would be Fnatic's pick. And then these 3-lane maps, they can feel very comfortable. They can get cheeky with that Odin spam.
They can, and PaperX, Fnatic would actually end up trading a lot in this very first. They were trying to see who could get control of the first half, but it ended up being PaperX 7-5. Fnatic, though, fighting back. Again, this is their map pick. This is number 4, so they are on their map pick. And they just weren't really able to grasp hold of what they need to really get going onto this that we kind of saw on the Icebox pick. So they were falling a little bit behind. PaperX, though, looking very good.
Yeah, PaperX starting off on that defense, too. It's almost exactly what you want on Lotus. Snap rotations, especially with the composition that they did bring to the table. Something back over towards the Yoru was not there over towards Fnatic's side. And when you do have something on Yoru defensively, you can use the gate crashes to make very quick rotations. 1v2 around the corner, gets the scope in, and I don't know how Boaster doesn't get that trade, but something walks away with a 1v2, and, well, they're all very, very... Devi was very impressed, I should say that much. But back over towards the opposite side, again, Chronicle in a 1v2 situation does end up finding it the first, but then you got Devi, he's got the AWP, very aware of it, holding the angle, and again, Devi, he was just simply not missing. If he was, it was happening very infrequently throughout the entirety of the series. Last moment coming through, spike going to be planted, PaperX will end up winning it. We got ourselves another overtime.
Yes, and once again, it just seems like Fnatic unable to close that map out when they are on the map point, and this leads this time to another overtime. As you said, unfortunately for Fnatic, it would not go their way. They would end up losing the 2 in the row needed. PaperX would find those 2 kills. Here we are at the very end. Something Forsaken in this 2v4, though. 2v4, it looks like it should be a win for Fnatic, but something has something to say about that. And Forsaken as well, both of them doing such a clutch job on this, getting those final kills needed to win.
And how about that coming through for something? He will end up joining alongside PaperX for a monumental, historic, and yet Herculean run all the way through the winner's bracket. Again, they lost 11 straight to Team Liquid with a stand-in in their last Swiss map, and they end up beating G2 Esports, world number 1 seed going in towards this tournament. Sentinels, America's number 2. Both of those 2-0, by the way. Wolves, the Aura Farmers, they end up losing as well. The only top team throughout all of this tournament that Fnatic did not face, and I'd have to go back because I'm pretty sure that they didn't face them in the Swiss, was Gen G. That's the only team that they did not face throughout the entirety of the Swiss stage. Otherwise, they faced all the number ones from all the other regions. They beat them. Number 2, including Sentinel, which, again, nobody had them doing that as well. Winners bracket bound is insane, but to be able to do it the way that they did was absolutely fantastic. But I will tip my cap to Fnatic. That lower bracket run is no easy feat. I'm sure that for Crashies, he would have loved to be able to be back up on that stage, hoisting another trophy for his closet, but it just was not meant to be. This was Paper X tournament to lose.
Yes, and I mean, we're looking at it, and I saw a stat earlier, just the APAC region as well as the Asian region in a whole, they have won 4 in a row at this point. So we had Gen G winning, then I believe it was EDG, T1, and now Paper X. Apex is on a whole nother level right now. The APAC region is just a whole nother level.
Yeah, they sure are. Again, let us know in the comments down below. Who did you have in that grand final, and how messed up were your pick'ems at the end of it? Because mine weren't too bad, but you let us know down in the comments down below. But that's going to have to do it for Valorant. Again, we won't see them in action for a few weeks' time, so make sure that you are tuning along for the Global Gaming Network channel. We'll keep you up to date on everything you need to know as far as Valorant is concerned. But something's in the air. Finally, it feels like that stench has been gone from my nostrils for about a month. It's Call of Duty time, baby. And towards the end of this week, we're going to be in Kitchener, Ontario for Champs.
Tries to find a pinch. The timing on this could be unbelievable. No one from the Ravens. Oh, Draza for 3.
It's out to Joe to see it's for the ball. Ace! Oh! Neptune, can he clutch? He's in. 2-piece.
The passion is flowing from Miami, and they have got a massive lead.
Follow-up Draza for 3. Full ace and 6 in a row for Draza.
Are we witnessing the most unbelievable round of control? Your Major 1 champions, Atlanta
Your Major
FaZe.
2 champions, Atlanta FaZe.
Your Major 3 champions, the LA Thieves.
Winning back-to-back
For the LA Thieves, your Major 4 champ.
You saw it right there on your screens this upcoming weekend in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Hosted by the Toronto Ultra. All the squirrels are going nuts up there because it is time for Champs. As we are finally ready to see the conclusion of the Black Ops 6 season. The top 8 teams from out the entirety of said season will finally combat against each other in a double elimination tournament. The other 4 teams we'll be seeing at the Esports World Cup later on in the summer. But here is that bracket for you guys to be able to take a look at throughout the entirety of this tournament. You got the number 1 seed of the LA Thieves, number 2 seed Atlanta FaZe, all the way down to the 8th seed of the Carolina Royal Ravens in their opening matchups. Just for a quick discussion, LA Thieves Breach, got my eyes on that one. FaZe versus Optic El Clasico to start off the entirety of the tournament is absolutely insane. But we got to somehow whittle our way all the way down. 2 grand finals there on June 29th, this upcoming Sunday, there in Kitchener, to be able to see who our champion is going to be. But as far as opening matchups are concerned, I feel like that the one that has the most potential to be an absolute classic for the tournament in the opening round would end up being Vancouver Surge versus Miami Heretics. The simple seasoning of all of this being is the Miami Heretics have constantly been on the up and up since Super was added in towards the team, and ever since Major 2, or I would probably say halfway through Major 3 in their qualification stages, Vancouver Surge have been on a steady decline. If you forgot, going in towards Major 3 and Major 4, not the greatest look for Vancouver Surge, especially at Major 4. At DreamHack, on the B stream, they got eliminated by the Vegas Falcons. That was the first LAN match win for the Vegas Falcons in their franchise throughout the entirety of the CDL season. That's not a good thing that you want going over your head going in towards Champs, but we are hopeful that Vancouver Surge is going to be able to figure it out. They do have a world champion coach of Rambo Ray behind the scenes going up against the Miami Heretics. Again, as I was saying, they have been looking so much better. The last time they faced against each other was on LAN back in Major 2 in Winners Round 1, getting ahead of myself here. Now over towards LA Thieves versus Boston. The last time they faced each other was in Winners Round 1 at Major 2, and this one did not go the way of LA Thieves. It was a 1-3 loss, and Boston Breach then went on, I think, to end placing top 6, and then LA Thieves ended up placing, I want to say, about top 3, but throughout all the resurgence and the consistency, Boston Breach are hoping to maybe do the same thing against LA Thieves, but it's not looking too good. That super team did just win back-to-back opening majors. Carolina Royal Ravens versus Ultra this time around. Carolina just have not been the same ever since Rex has been introduced towards this roster, though they make it the champs all off of their pro points that they were able to accrue, or the CDL points, excuse me, they were able to accrue from the beginning of the season. Again, top 2 in the minor 1 tournament, top 6 minor 2. They got really good placings both at Major 1 and Major 2, and that was enough to keep them at this threshold. So they're going to be going up against Toronto Ultra, the hosting team, so that's a much more of a good luck, have fun moment when it comes down to Carolina Royal Ravens, because Joe Deceives, Beans, when that crowd is behind them, they are going to be looking absolutely nuts. And now let's go and take a look a little bit deeper as far as the two Titans, as far as this tournament is concerned. They are both donned in red, but are very, very different as far as their season is concerned. Mostly starting the conversation there with LA Thieves. They are the first team to actually unearth Atlanta FaZe from the number 1 seed going in towards champs in the CDL era. NW 2019 all the way until last year at MW3. Atlanta FaZe were always the number 1 seeded team going in towards champs, but with their grand finals win at Major 4 at DreamHack, not only have LA Thieves solidified that they're the better team going in towards the final tournament of the year, but they're the number 1 seed to boot, which says a lot given how much stature you do have from the Atlanta FaZe. They started off absolutely hot. They won Major 1 from the number 6 seed, and then they went in towards Major 2 as the number 1 seed, and you guessed it, they were able to win that as well. That's then the three-peat from Esports World Cup, Major 1, and then Major 2 with the same core 4 roster, but then halfway through the season, they started to fall off a little bit more. Top 6 at Major 3. Nobody saw that one coming. And then the Atlanta FaZe making it all the way back towards Grand Finals in Major 4. We thought that they were back in prime form. Not going to be the case, as they did lose to LA Thieves, as you saw there in that hype video. But the Thieves, on the opposite side, they finished strong. In that Major 1, in that Grand Finals versus Atlanta FaZe, was against LA Thieves, which it did go map 7, round 11. So very close to winning that Major 1 win, but still not there at the beginning. But then towards the end of the season, LA Thieves really started to turn things up in a better way. Consistency, to say the least. Major 1, they got second, losing that map 7 to Atlanta FaZe. Major 2, they got top 4 because they got absolutely smacked by Toronto Ultra in that lower semifinal match. But then Major 3, Major 4, they were able to win Major 3 from the winners bracket, Major 4 from the winners bracket, excuse me, or from the lower bracket, where they were able to get the run back versus the Miami Heretics, winning 3-0, and then going up against Atlanta FaZe. It only took 6 maps this time around. So big pumped up for LA Thieves and all of its fans, as they are now going to be sitting at the top of the totem pole going in towards champs. Envoy, Ghosty, Scrap, and Hydra. This super team was generated at the beginning of the year to do just exactly what they've been doing, and that is to win tournaments and to win championships. So LA Thieves, can they get the job done? Because again, their biggest challenge throughout the entirety of this tournament, although on the complete opposite sides of the bracket, they could end up facing up against Atlanta FaZe, whether that's in winners finals or through grand finals. I could definitely foresee LA Thieves having to go up against Atlanta FaZe. Atlanta FaZe has been at the top of the totem pole for all of CDL. They've won the majority of grand finals throughout the majority of majors, but have only won 1 chip back in Cold War. LA Thieves, again, 2/4 of this team was a part of Toronto Ultra, both Envoy as well as Scrap. Just last season, Ghosty is the only returning player, and finally got his major win. They're finally getting the back-to-backs going, and they feel like that they are truly undeniable. We've seen the lows of this team before as well, and we just hope that it does not stoop down too far, as the break was definitely tenuous in between Major 4 at DreamHack and champs this upcoming week. But that's from their Major 3 win right there. The big old plays going up against the Vancouver Surge. This is their grand finals moment and their win going up against Atlanta FaZe. Scrap letting them all know, yeah, we just beat the number 1 team in the world. We are indeed that super team worth every single penny. We'll have to end up seeing this upcoming week, because truly spoken, Atlanta FaZe, you might as well have them in the same conversation for being on the same level, given the fact that they started off the season winning both Major 1 and Major 2 from the winners bracket side. They beat LA Thieves twice in that Major 1, both in winners finals and in the grand finals, though it going the absolute distance. Beat Vancouver Surge twice in the Major 2 run, and then throughout Major 3, that's where we started seeing a little bit of a steep decline coming through from Atlanta FaZe. They got top 6 at Major 3, and then going in towards Major 4 qualifiers, all back to being hunky-dory. We get back over towards the winner's side, in towards grand finals, and then they have to go up against a white-hot LA Thieves, which they lose in a map 6. But we are very hopeful for this roster, again, as a core 3 Simp, Abizi, and Celium from left to right have always been playing together since NW 2019 and CDL's inception, with the inclusion of Draza towards the beginning of last season, where they were able to go on a massive run. They fell out of champs, but then they made it to EWC, where they won the entire thing, rectifying their woes at MW3 champs, and then continuing on with such a rampage going in towards Major 1. This is the grand finals from said major all the way across the seas in Spain, where they were going up against LA Thieves, where Abizi, throughout protocol, especially on control, was constantly just finding a lot of good damage and a lot of good value for his team. Simp was in candidates for at least MVP conversations throughout the entirety of the year, and the same could be said on the opposite side, but all Atlanta FaZe focus. When this team is on, this team does not lose. We know that the teamwork from Simp and Abizi is absolutely stellar. We know that their small talk is even better. Don't worry about it, Mr. Chris Lair. We know that you're trying to play the villain, but we know you're a good guy at heart. So good old smack talk in between these two teams again. You get just about everything when it comes down to the two red teams facing off against each other. Good vibes, but even better storylines. And this is going over towards that Major 2 win. Previous in the winners finals, it did go map 5, round 11, where FaZe were able to put themselves in the grand finals, and then they went into grand finals and they absolutely milli-whopped all of Vancouver Surge. So now we're going to shift our focus over towards Toronto Ultra. Toronto Ultra might as well be the number 3 team in the game, though they may not have an argument for that when it comes down to major wins. They have only gotten top 3, both Major 2 and Major 3, and top 6 and Major 1 and Major 4, though we put an asterisk on that Major 3 ever so slightly, as that's when Mercules was standing in for their team. Their run, as far as the season is concerned, has been a tough one, but we always expect them to do okay, given that Insight and Kleenex are the 2 remaining players from this roster throughout the entirety of their time spent together in the organization. They have constantly always been at the top of the food chain, whether that's top 5 at worst, top 3, or even contending with major championships. So when it comes down to Toronto Ultra, their biggest key moments and takeaway from victory, you're the home team. You're gonna have the entire crowd behind you at this point. So when Benjamin Button Beans is having the roar of the crowd behind him and everybody's screaming dead with him, I imagine that he's gonna do quite well. Same for Joe Deceives. We got to see what Joe Deceives does on land when he's playing alongside his teammates, an absolute lanimal. And he can keep up pace with Kleenex just as much as the best of them, and that sets up this team for utter success. They are a wild card when it comes down to a potential top 4, top 3 matchup, but we'll have to see how they fare in just a few days' time. Now over towards the Vancouver Surge. This team has a interesting conversation around them, given Major 1, top 12, playing with Hixie. They made a roster change. They brought in Travis Neptune for Major 2, where they were able to make all the way a massive run for that minor tournament that happened in that Major 2 qualification area as well. Did lose to LA Thieves then. Major 2, though, made it back to grand finals, losing that map 5 round 11 to Draza 1v1. I think it was against 04, but semantics aside, they make it back to grand finals. They lose 04. Then they go back over towards Major 3. They face LA Thieves. Map 5, I think it was like a round 10 or something like that. Hydra clutches it, and then they go up against Toronto Ultra again, beat them 3-1 in that lower finals again, and then they go up against LA Thieves in the grand finals, but then lose 0-4. Are you catching a trend here? They lose to the red team in winners finals. They lose to a purple team in lower final, or they win 3-1 versus the purple team in lower finals, and then they lose again to the red team without taking a single map in grand finals. But the biggest kicker was at Major 4. We knew that they were going to lose to LA Thieves, maybe not as dramatically as they did, but to give the Las Vegas Falcons their first land win the entire season and to bow out top 12 after back-to-back second places, that ain't going to be good enough when it comes down to the Vancouver Surge. So we'll have to see what they're going to be looking like going in towards the entirety of this tournament. Again, Nasty, Neptune, 04, and Abuza have constantly been turning heads. It mostly comes down to the consistency that you're going to be getting from this team. Neptune and 04 need to try to step up and maybe try to help out their team, because we know that Nasty and Abuza are absolute straight shooters, and they will definitely bring the slaying for this team. It's just whether or not they can turn that slaying into hardpoint time, turn the slaying into just map wins in general. Only time will certainly tell. Now for the Miami Heretics. Through Major 1, they started off with a massive run. Though the home crowd behind them, we thought that maybe they could make it towards the grand finals. That was with the old roster when they were playing with Lucky. Same roster going in towards Major 2 where they started the lower bracket, and they bowed out top 12 facing LA Thieves. They've been eliminated by the LA Thieves. Back-to-back tournaments, and they ended up seeing them again at Major 3, but this time with a whole different look. Although losing in the winners bracket side, they would then go on to eliminate Atlanta FaZe top 6 and then lose to Toronto Ultra for top 4. But then Major 4 was the biggest talking point with Super in the mix. They only lost to the red teams. They beat Minnesota Rocker in that winners round 1, and then the LA Thieves in the winners the winners quarterfinal match, then proceeded to lose to Atlanta FaZe in the winners finals, and then LA Thieves in the lower finals for that top 3rd position. But throughout all of that, being able to play at least 2 of those teams close throughout the entirety of the end of the season, you feel like Metals, Real, Rancor, and Super, we don't know what their ceiling truly could be because Rancor has been a Rookie of the Year candidate. Super also right there with them. When these 2 are firing off on all cylinders, Metals and Real, they might as well be the 2 best sub-machine gun players in the game. Their opening matchup going up against Vancouver Surge, they're going to have to try to keep up that pace, and we'll end up seeing a lot of that pace being exemplified here in this highlight package. Again, every time that they face a top team, they always do quite well. They can definitely play up to the levels, especially with Rancor being the AR flex that he is. This is against LA Thieves, by the way, on Hacienda, where we do have Super SMG in hand, double positive. Rancor was double positive. Real with an SMG as well. Very, very good and very, very fast-paced player, but still, Miami Heretics, we have so many question marks and so many unknowns about what this team could potentially do. Now over towards Carolina Royal Ravens. This is your number 6-seeded team overall, but the number 8 team probably in attendance. You can see the beginning of their season. Not too bad. 4th place. They got that 2nd place in Minor 1. And then the season proceeded to get further and further worsened for them. I mean, they started in the winners bracket. All 3 of 4 majors, until that Major 4 where they did make that, or Major 3 where they did make that swap for Dylan Rex. They dropped Vivid, and then going in towards their opening matchup, losing to Minnesota Rocker and then getting eliminated by the Thieves is just not a good look for this Carolina Royal Ravens team. Starting in the lower bracket for Major 4, this team just could not piece it together. They were starting to look a little bit better, but it's still so many more question marks. Rex was that replacement for Reese Vivid towards the end of the season under a lot of different controversy. TJ Halley, Gwyn, and Slasher are hoping to get this team in a better position to maybe get a bigger prize pooling. But as far as a franchise is concerned for the Royal Ravens name, even though it is in Carolina and it used to be in London, it's their first championship that they're actually going to be at towards the end of the year. But we just don't know what we're going to get from this Carolina team. Gwyn on LAN is very hit or miss. Slasher has had one of his worst stages that we've had from him the entirety of the year. And TJ Halley, you can see right there on Hardpoint, 8-26. That's not going to be good enough, but TJ Halley is still up on the top 5 for leaderboards when it comes down to overall and S&D KD ratios. Now moving over towards Optic Texas, our number 7 seed. Their major results are a little bit all over the place because they haven't gone into any one of these majors with the same exact team. Major 1 and Major 3 might as well be the closest that we would have in between the 2, but still, I digress. This team is still have a lot to answer for. Major 4 is probably where we saw their closest, given that now they finally have Mercules in towards this roster. So Dashy, Hook, Shotzi, Mercules, that's your 4-player roster for Optic Texas. We're hoping to make a run for the Green Wall. Just a few weeks ago, or even a month ago, people were suspecting that Optic Texas weren't even going to be at champs, and that would have been absolutely disastrous given the stature that this team does hold. World champions, by the way, at the NW3 roster, they have made changes from Skies, Hook, Pred being in and out of this roster throughout the entirety of the calendar year, finally leading towards a massive Major 4 moment. It was right here where they ended up beating Minnesota Rocker, Kenny's Minnesota Rocker, so denying any sort of retribution there, and then going on through the lower bracket run to be able to solidify enough CDL points to then make it to champs. But now, finally, the Boston Breach. They are going to be our number 8 seed, previously number 7, after getting outplaced by Optic Texas at the beginning or at the end of Major 4. This is a team that has had a really struggle as far as their profile is concerned. Stuck with the same roster ever since EWC after the core 3 of this team did win for Lore Gaming back at NW3 Challengers Finals. and they've been so-so. I mean, like, they're competing, they're keeping maps close, they're taking some maps and some series off of some other teams, including that 1-3 win over LA Thieves back at a major. So I think that the Boston Breach are definitely a wild card as far as what they might be able to produce throughout the entirety of this bracket, but we won't know what Boston Breach we get until we actually get to the tournament itself. So, with all of that said, I truly do think that Boston Breach, albeit a lot of question marks, definitely have the ante. I think Snoopy's a very good player. Clearly, Boston Breach are putting a lot of money and time in towards this young man to be able to build a roster around him. But is it the right roster for them to be able to make a championship run? I don't think that we would have that any sort of argument maybe anytime soon. But you let us know in the comments down below who you think is going to end up taking all of champs as well. So we want to get involved in the conversations. You guys let us know. But that's going to at least do it for COD. And we hope to see you guys there at champs. I'll be in attendance. Will you? And with all of that being said, as far as Call of Duty is concerned, that'll at least be on the shelf until we get done with Kitchener. But Chris, we got some league we got to get through, bud.
We do. And finally, all the shooty shoots have concluded. I can finally get to the Rift here. And well, guess what? As we are going from one end of Canada to the other, MSI is taking place in Vancouver starting this Thursday, June 26th with the play-ins. But let's go ahead and get talking about how we got here, who we're going to see, and just start building up the hype and ignite the fire within. It is time for MSI 2025 in Vancouver, and well, we have a lot to talk over. So again, let's start with our qualified teams here. G2, Koi will be our EU representatives. We have the Koi taking the first place. G2 will be in that play-in. For LCK, they did have the extra place that qualified them for the bracket stage after HLE won first stand, so we'll have Genji and T1 already making their way there. In the LPL, we had Anyone's Legends taking the win over BLG to give them the first seed, so they'll be sitting in that bracket waiting to see if BLG can make it through the play-ins. LCP, CFO, did make it once again along with GAM. They did beat them, so CFO will be sitting in that bracket stage with GAM in the plan. And then for LTA North representative will be FlyQuest after their win over C9. And then Furia will be the LTA South representatives. They'll have to go through the plan after their win over Pain Gaming. So that are going to be our representatives for MSI 25. And well, we have a banger. So with Fearless introduced this season, we do have the change being made that all games will actually be played as a best of 5 going in. That's including plans in all of bracket stages. So we are going to make the entirety use of this. So it doesn't mean that teams such as BLG and LCK teams as Genji and T1 have all played so many best of 5s. They've played around 60 or so odd games to actually get to MSI. Are going to have a lot of preparation in that. We'll have to see how some of the other regions make their way to that as well. As we know, LTA didn't have as many best of 5s played, so that could be, something that we see play into the tournament as well. But we also have a little bit of a different draw. So with First Stand being added this year as well, we do have some draws. And the way that the draws are is that there are 4 tiers. The first tier are going to the LCK and the LEC. This is due to the standings from First Stand. So since we did have HLE for the LCK winning First Stand, and then the runners-up being Carmine Corp from LEC, they're going to be that first tier, which means that if in a draw scenario is needed, they'll be drawn in that tier. So the second tier, of course, will be the LCP, and then the LPL for getting that 3rd and 4th spot, and then in the 3rd tier will be actually LCK's 2nd seed that's coming in, and then LTA's North seed, which will be LTA North. Then the 4th tier will be those 2 play-in teams, so it depends on who gets out of the play-in bracket to get one of those draws. The drawing will come later, and we'll get more detail to that after this week and as we go into the bracket stage, and all our teams are determined for that bracket stage as well. But let's go ahead and talk about how some of our teams got here, and let's talk about some stories. So, of course, we did have Koi upsetting Carmine Corp and G2 to get into that first seed, so good job to them for making that. T1, of course, beats First Stand's first place winners HLE to make it for the LCK as the 2nd seed. And then, of course, CFO is the actually only returning team from first stand to make it into MSI. So great job for them for making it. And then, of course, we should have the bracket for opening matches. G2 will be playing against Furia, and then BLG will be playing against GAM. So that will be our first match. On that Thursday, it will be G2 versus Furia. On Friday, then will be BLG versus GAM. So Gigabyte Marines, we'll have to see who can win against those. But let's go and take a look at how all these teams got here and then jump into those brackets. And we'll start with the LTA North. LTA North, of course, as I said, our representatives are FlyQuest. They did end up winning 3-2 versus Cloud9, and they had to do it twice to get there. They made a massive run. Cloud9 would end up trying to make a lower run. They would end up being Shopify Rebellion, but again would fall to FlyQuest once again. FlyQuest making another run at an international tournament. We're great to see them there. Moving to LTA South, as I said, we did have Furia, who would end up winning theirs. They would actually have to go through the lower. They would end up losing the Pain in the upper bracket, having to face against IE in the lower bracket finals, and then would take a clean sweep versus Pain to book their ticket to MSI. Now, moving on to LEC, again, we had some bangers, and Koi would do exactly the same as Furia. They would end up losing to G2 1-3 in the upper finals. They would again face Karma Corps, who they had beat earlier 3-2 once again, and then end up going into an electric grand finals versus G2 Esports, where they would win 1-3, reversing the script and taking that #1 seed for Europe. Now, let's take a look at LCP. CFO, as I said, are the only team that are returning from first stand to MSI, and they did in spectacular fashion. They would win their round 3 versus Talon, moving to the grand finals. GAM would then have to make a lower run after losing to CFO in round number 2. They would beat Secret, Talon, and then make their way to round 4, where they would put on an impressive 5 games, but ultimately losing in that game number 5 versus the Flying Oysters to book that second seed. CFO being the first seed will again be in that bracket stage. Now, LCP China, well, they had a really confusing bracket, but luckily their playoff bracket was pretty simple to follow leading up to it. Anyone's Legends looking absolutely amazing through the entirety of the split 2 for the LPL. Now, let's take a look at how they got here. So they would be in that upper bracket semifinals as they had won versus WE. First, end up playing against Weibo Gaming, where they would defeat them 3-1. They would have a tough time versus BLG in that upper bracket finals, moving to the grand finals. BLG would then get pushed to the lower bracket, where they would end up facing against IG. They would end up being IG, and then once again losing to Anyone's Legends in the grand finals 3-1. Anyone's Legends again taking that first seed for the side of LPL to move on to that bracket stage. BLG will have to try to play through that play-in bracket to try to get to the bracket stage for MSI to see if they can get any revenge. Now, moving on to the LCK, they had a little bit of a different path to MSI, as they did not really have a playoffs, but what they called the road to MSI. So Gen.G, HLE being the top 2 seeds automatically got into that round 1. They played against each other, where Gen.G ended up winning, automatically pushing them to MSI. Now that meant that HLE would have to face down and face against the remaining of the teams that were trying to make their way through the snake style ladder to get up and see who can make the second seed for MSI. And it ultimately would be T1 in spectacular fashion, beating KT Rolster and HLE, forcing the first stand champions into a non-contestation for MSI. They would end up getting that win and allowing them to move on. So T1 will be that second representative for the LCK, and thanks to the efforts of HLE, they'll be in that bracket stage as well. It's a great job for them. And, well, what can I say? This is going to be a massive tournament. Across the board, I can't say who is going to win. Gen.G are looking absolutely amazing, but again, they did have a little bit of a weakness shown in their matches versus HLE, so we'll have to see who comes out. T1, of course, looking in much better form as we usually see them. And when they make international events, can they take another title is yet to be seen at the moment. So we'll have to see all that takes place on June 26th. As I said, will be that first opening match between G2 and Furia for the play-in stage.
June's going to be jam-packed with a lot of different actions. You guys let us know what you're most excited for, or if you're just staying close to the vest and just waiting for the end of July when we get more Valorant and Counter-Strike action back. Let us know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe for the videos and all of the Global Gaming Network channel so that way you can get along with all the conversations that we have from Queued Up, from the shorters today in esports, or even Skill Def. We'd love to have you in all of our different viewership included. Until next time, you guys stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.